Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Susan Corbett, custom machine quilter, here today to show you how I've transformed this simple log cabin quilt. It's just a basic log cabin with two colors, red and white, and I had no design inspiration to go on, no special instruction from the client. All I knew was that it was to be a gift for another client. And I would have thought, well, some idea will suggest itself, but I really had to think about this one. So, right off the bat, it's all straight lines and hard angles. And so I thought, well, let's do some curves for sure. But that's all I knew I wanted to do. So I looked at a whole bunch of designs all over the place. The way these log cabin blocks are arranged, my usual log cabin ideas didn't exactly fit. Have the white and the red linked up and become bands of color, that would be a bit more straightforward. This was not. And with these two colors, like, it would be really easy to go all out and do all kinds of ambitious things. And I didn't think that was indicated here. It's not a grand quilt, with lots of applique and all different other kinds of bells and whistles. It's straightforward. So, but a straightforward design scheme is not something I'm naturally good at. I am always going to want to think, what's a grand, beautiful thing I can do to elevate this top? So in my searchings, I found this paisley design, and I computer quilted it. As it turns out, my clients told me that the recipient really, really likes paisleys. So, I'm always saying I quilt intuitively, and I did. I intuited that a paisley would be a good way to go. What I think I did not do very successfully here is getting the scale right. I think it needs to be much larger. It's a very detailed, compact design. So that's one issue. The other issue is, this quilt is pretty well tone on tone, and the paisley hits right on the fabric that is a print, a definite print. So I think it's hard to see what it is. It's a throw, so up close and personal, I think it'll be great. But, you get a couple feet away from it and it's not going to be straightforward at all. It did not fit the shape too perfectly well, so that was another challenge. I hadn't planned on doing much quilting in what turns out to be the sashing. So that was a puzzle piece I had to figure out. Now, the client who is the recipient of this surprise quilt, over the years has been after me to step up the use of contrasting thread. She likes the way black thread looks on the backgrounds. And that wasn't applicable here on this quilt, but I thought, well, the white thread is going to be, it'll serve that same purpose. Contrasting thread scares a lot of people. I try and talk my clients into it, and they're extremely reticent to go along with that concept. What I've learned over the years is that people people really do like contrasting thread, as long as it's a low contrast, not high. Had I been using black thread on this white fabric, okay, that's about the highest form of contrast there is. The successful examples of it I've seen out there online are dramatic and drop-dead gorgeous. But every little stitch is going to show right up. You're going to see everything. So I feel pretty safe doing white thread on the white parts of this quilt. It makes me much more nervous to use white thread on the red because all of it does show up. You know, I'm definitely trying to live down that perfectionist label, and this is where I can prove to you that I'm not anything like a perfectionist at all, because you can see every little tiny imperfection everywhere. They're just going to leap out of there. I think it's worth doing on this quilt, right? This quilt is not going to be entered into a major national show. It doesn't have to be perfect. I know the client isn't expecting perfection. I don't think there is a machine quilter out there who can get you perfect quilting. Some can get close, but that's still a really high bar. So that's one thing. And these fills I'm doing require backtracking, and those need to be as accurate as possible. So if nothing else, this is tremendous progress. So any imperfection you see on the white and you don't know it's there, you're totally going to see on the back, because the back is totally red. It's a solid piece of red fabric back there. So there's no getting around it. But that's okay, because the quilting doesn't have to be perfect. It just flat doesn't. It's all, well, it's all, this part is all freehand anyway, so that's not going to happen. Okay, so I put in the paisley, and then I thought, okay, what am I going to do next? And I'm staring at the quilt, and it's just not talking to me. So I thought, well, what can I do with round? So I thought, let's do some ruler work here. So I got two great big rulers. One is a big half circle. The other is my trusty arch guide. And I thought, let's put in some architecture here and then fill in with some background fills and see what happens. This is experimental. I did not know how it was going to look. But I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? You know, nothing. I think I'll either like it or I won't like it. The client will love it or not love it. But I think it'll probably be okay. It'll work out. It just will. And I think it did. Is it the best thing in the world? Probably not. But gosh, it was a lot of fun to do. It was so much fun to do. And nobody else has a quilt that looks like this, which is kind of the whole point of custom anyway. So I think that's a plus. It's very unique. So I put in the half circle, and then I threw in, or started with the arch, and then went for the half circle. You know, I've got these spaces carved up. So the first design I put in was that stylized flower meander. And in some blocks I, arranged it to where it's going in this direction, and other blocks it'll go in the other direction. And then I added some little clamshells and echoed that. And in this section of the white fabric, I'm doing little shells. You do a little sort of loop, and then you echo it a few times. So all these are meanders. They go in every which way. They're fast to do, and they're fun. They are ornate. In contrast to those broad lines of ruler work, this is the opposite. So what's good about that is it's good contrast. And these designs, I think, are things you would normally see in a paisley. So it's kind of, it could be argued these elements are deconstructed paisleys. I don't know. That's my rationale, and I'm sticking to it. So I think it's darling. I think the scale is okay. And really, that's the basis for the quilt. All the rest of the quilting are these basic shapes done in all different sizes and directions and scales, but this is the ball game. These designs are ones I've had in my library for quite some time. So the ruler work part of it was experimental, but this stuff, any of these designs could be overall quilting designs if they were larger. Okay, and all the ruler work, it's very similar, but they're still a little tiny bit different in each block. I did not measure with precision to make sure they're all, the exact same size and the exact same angle, because I don't think that matters. Just putting the paisleys in. They didn't want to go in those red spaces evenly. The spacing was different here and there. And why is that? Because fabric is a fabric, and it stretches. And is the piecing perfect? Is it all perfectly standardized? No. When you go to put something together, you're going through the same motions, but there will be slight differences here and there. So at the top of the paisley, it wanted to jut out into a part of the quilt where I didn't want it, but I gave up on that because I didn't want to have to resize everyone. I mean, just positioning that paisley was much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I mean, all the paisleys are sort of in the same place, but not really. They are in theory, but not in practice. In retrospect, at the end of this project, I thought, okay, where the blocks go into a bunch of red border, how cool would it have been to really enlarge that paisley design and extend it up into the border? I think that would have been great. No guts, no glory. And so, yeah, there's no glory here on that scale. I wish I had done it. I think that would be really different, pretty dramatic. I think that paisley could really stand to be much more large. Think what different remaining spaces there would have been in the border to play with. I think that would really have been something. So, well, lesson learned. All right, so with this background fill, you want to pay attention to all the stops and starts, where they're going. Is there room for another one of these flowers? And so with this design, I find myself adding a lot more stops and starts just because I don't want these little teeny tiny flowers and then end up with a great big one next to it. I like varying sizes, but I guess I just wanted to have a little bit more control over placement of these things. And I got a lot of attempts to get that right because they're here in these blocks and they're also all over the border. The border was probably the main challenge of this quilt, although this was pretty challenging all around because the way the blocks are arranged and the way this design fell down to one side of the border, well, I could see that it's not going to end up being that way on the other three sides. So All four sides of the border are different, even though they're all pretty similar. And we'll get a better look at that here in a while. So you see this stylized flower, I started at the top of this shape and am going down. So they're upside down. And that doesn't matter because I don't know which way the quilt is going to be, I don't know, is it going to be displayed? Is it going to be used? So whichever way you have it, it's all going to go in a different direction. So the direction doesn't matter. It's interesting to see what happens to that pattern, or I guess the quilting of it, when you start at that broad side at the bottom, as opposed to up there at that pointy top. And I could have changed what direction these clamshells are going in, and I didn't. And that strikes me now as a thing that would have been fun to play with, but I didn't vary it too much in this quilt. I guess that turned out to be a thing I didn't want to have to think about. I just took off doing it. Okay, so the thread is white. I used Omni by Superior. The batting in here is Hobbs 80/20, which is my standard thing. Just about any bat would have been good in here. I wanted something with a little puff, with at least a little bit of loft, so that the quilting motifs would pop right up. And one of the things I like about that stylized flower meander is that little row of echo really helps sculpt out that design. Then the big puffy parts actually get to puff. And the echo serves as a condenser. Now, if you've ever seen any other videos I've put out, you know by now that the first thing I do is stabilize the quilt, which I have neglected to mention. So notice the ditch quilting between the red and the white. And that's pretty much all the stabilizing that happened here. But I think that's a crucial part of this quilt, as with any other. That's going to make a big difference, because there's not going to be a whole lot of quilting on the red parts. So I wouldn't want those seams to be sticking up there in a haphazard, disorderly kind of way. So you could have used clear thread here. That would have been nice. Or white. Okay, so now we're into a part of the border. The way I had the quilt put on, this is going to be the right side of the left side of this border. And this is where, see, I wasn't going to be able to extend the lines from the blocks because they just don't go there. So, design challenge. I thought, well, let's just start with a partial circle and then let's put in our arch and see what we end up with there. These are not all the same. They're similar. I could have put that arch anywhere. I'm making this whole thing up as I go along, which is fine. I'm not being too careful or picky. I'm not measuring to make sure those two parallel lines are perfectly parallel. They're similar. I don't think you'll notice any imperfections. So at the widest part of the leftover spaces, I'm going to do that stylized flower meander, which was making me really nervous because, okay, now we're totally into contrasting thread territory. It's all showing up. You start with a half circle and then you echo it, and then you add flower petals, and then you echo that. And this is a really good thing to practice when you're doing a meander, because you see, you're gonna end up where you started, pretty much. So if you want to be over there, you have to add another row of echo or a stop and a start and begin again. There's a whole lot of instruction that I think on a meander, you kind of have to get in there and do it and teach yourself. It's a learn by doing kind of a thing. And the more you do it, the more you'll learn. Except on this design, I can never remember. Now, where am I going to end up? And see here, when you backtrack, see how much more you can totally see where I've backtracked. Look how much more pronounced the white thread is. And that's tricky. If I'm doing, say, for example, feathers with a contrasting thread, I really don't like the buildup of the contrasting thread around the stem, or where I've backtracked on the feathers themselves, because you get different colors. It's light here and super dark over there, and I think that's unsightly. So when I'm making feathers with a contrasting thread, I want to not backtrack as much. Quilt a feather right next to the other one, but not necessarily on top of it. And there's no way around it here. So as often as I've done this, I still can't get to perfect. I'm not a line follower. I can do some pretty great quilting, but I can't hit the line. I can get close, but that's as good as that's going to get. One of my teachers way back in the beginning was always saying, you have to know your limitations, which I think is in a movie. Didn't Clint Eastwood say the same thing? But it's a good point. You have to know what you can do and what you're not good at, and well, unless you just like disappointment and doing hard things. Okay, so once you get over that it's not going to be perfectly uniform and all that, it helps to stand back from the whole thing and think, wow, that is really pretty anyway. Standing back is really helpful. In the end, what the eye sees is the totality of the whole design, not each little individual stitch. And that's a blessing. What to do with these little bitty narrow leftover parts, that's also a bit of an art form. How do you fill in? Because at best, you're just going to get little parts of this design. I just do the best I can. And that's going to have to be okay. So up along this side, they're all very similar, but not exactly the same, which I am good with. So now, what am I going to do with the spaces in between these circles? And this brings us to the question, Well, all right. So to begin with, I want contrast. What is unlike a meander or a circle or an arch? A straight line. There's so much pattern happening here already. I don't need any more pattern. So a straight line seemed to be just exactly what is called for here. So I'm still sticking with the white thread here because I think that's going to be really good. Later on in the quilt, any more white thread is going to be overkill. I think you have to know when enough is enough and when more is way too much of a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you see it. So I'm not doing any math here. There's nothing serious happening here. I'm also unwilling to do any more backtracking. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's desirable. So I'm almost freehanding some straight lines and then quilting near that big circle, not directly on it. And for the most part, this worked itself out. And I stopped there because I didn't know what I was going to do between the lines, the ruler work, and the paisley. That's still up in the air. So here is some more clamshell. The backtracking here is small, so that was good. It's the same thing that happened on the white. It's just that now we're on the red. I'm trying to not make these clamshells very, very small because they don't need to be. So this is, the scale is kind of medium. I think big would have been a giant mistake. I like the size. Moving on to another side of the border, we are right up against a paisley here. There just wasn't that much room. So where there was room, I did the big circle and filled it in. In the smaller spaces, I'm going for more contrast, the same shapes, just on a smaller scale. And this time I think we'll have a little bit of fun with these circles. These circles need something different, and I don't exactly know what. The beauty of these nesting rulers are that putting them all together gives you something to hold on to. So you're not just using that large outer one that'll slip. Sometimes I tape these together, sometimes I don't. And now let's see. Yeah, let's do a much smaller circle, and that's going to leave me a big ring. That'll be interesting. Let's just fill in with a pattern meander. This is probably the fastest quilting on the whole quilt. You can do this in your sleep. It's ribbon candy. And you totally want that in a contrasting color. Matching thread here would be a waste of time. That would have no payoff whatsoever. We need another circle so that whatever goes in the middle of it isn't going to be right up against the pattern meander. That's not going to work. That's pretty. Also, where to put the smaller circles, that's a judgment call. I like it the way this one looks like that big circle is kind of on top of it. This looks like it's sort of behind it a little bit. I think that's interesting. I'm using a Hera marker. That tool will make a slight indentation on your fabric. That's for quilting you're going to do right now, not later, because that indentation will go away. But I just wanted to mark the center so I know where to stop when I get to the center. This is a very simple little series of arcs that will give you very big payoff. Because that design moves. It will look like a pinwheel spinning around there. It's not a lot of work, not a lot of thread, but looks pretty darn good. And it's very unlike the pattern meander. Really cute. So I did a whole bunch of that all over the place. And now, now that I've got all those motifs in there, now all that's left is background quilting. This is just cleanup work. So I don't want any more white thread right up against that paisley. And I don't need any more white thread in between all the quilting in that big circle with all that flower meander. So I've switched to a red thread, which is just gonna, the quilting will be there, but you'll probably never see it except in the right light. So why do it? Because that's too big of a space to leave unquilted. That just isn't going to be any good. That's not good for the longevity of the quilt. It'll be puffy and listless, and it won't wear well. It's not going to look good. It'll just look like an unmade bed at some point. Not being very precious about this part. It's not going to show up on the front or the back much. So I'm doing what I can up to a point. Let's just get it on the border itself before we go meeting up with the paisley and, where the where the intersections meet. So start to notice on the lower right-hand side of this shot, there are some straight lines going in the other direction when you get to the right side of the border. The quilting I'm doing right now, like, that was fine up till a certain point, and then I had some other spaces where I thought, well, what'll be good? So I filled in with that what do I call with some elongated rectangles around the smaller squares, and I really like how that looked, because that did not need more pattern either. So it gives the quilt some a harmonious design scheme to repeat your concepts in there, but just in a different direction. And you see one of the pattern meanders I used in the smaller circle was like a little zigzag. I just had fun with those. Okay, we're almost there. So now let's look at the spaces I've left for last. What do I do in the log cabin between the paisleys where the blocks form intersections? And so it made sense to me just to do more straight lines. But they are going to need to change directions depending on which way that patch is facing. And then I had to negotiate the space around the paisleys to get that to be uniform. I'm not backtracking on the paisley, just a little bit apart from it, and not being very precious about this type of stuff either. It's pretty loose and freehand. And I didn't go over every last little inch. I just filled in the larger spaces. I mean, even with the red thread, you can see how good it looks to change the directions of those straight lines. That's good. One last detail. You see what happened to the straight lines between these smaller circles, and this larger circle that extended out from the block into the border. It was pretty narrow. So I'm doing the same kind of straight line design that's on the right side of the circle, but in the red thread. I didn't see any need to go put the white thread back in there again. I thought it was good contrast to have this red melon shape next to the white fabrics. So now at the intersections, I've got vertical lines on the top going up into that paisley. We'll stop at the corner, and then there will be horizontal lines underneath this section. The red thread won't show right up against that white paisley, which is good. I can start right at the edge of it and go all the way to the other side. And then go back to vertical as needed. Here are some detailed shots of the back of the quilt. You can see more of the fun stuff I did with the smaller circles. You can see all the backtracking. You can get a much better look at that paisley design. You can see the lines. Lines always show up even with matching thread. So that was fun.